All right. So, we are recording. Welcome, everybody, to episode 13 of the Cult Cinema Podcast. This is Spooktober that these episodes will be released in. October.
Yes, October.
So,
Halloween season.
of course, we have to talk about some cult classic horror films.
Yes.
Even though we just did one. We got to do another.
I know, that was terrible timing on our part, but whatever. It happened.
Yeah. But these, at least the one that we are talking about today, 28 Days Later, if you haven't seen the title yet, which is right below us. Yeah, this is my second time watching this movie, and it's not as like gory as I remember it being. I remember it being a little bit more gruesome, but yeah, so I'm excited to talk about it because this is one of my favorite zombie movies ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Just like the way, I don't know, there's something about it, the fact that it's shot and like on the old like digital cameras that I really like, because I mean the whole point of them shooting on digital was to give it a more like urban aesthetic. And so, but yeah, so
I thought you'd probably have a lot of fun with this one just strictly based on the cinematography.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's really cool. I love Cillian Murphy, which I saw someone pointed out on Instagram that Billie Eilish just looks like a female version of Cillian Murphy, and now I can't get that out of my head.
I don't see that, but okay.
If you look at them side by side, you'd see it, but it's weird.
All right.
But anyway, so shall we get started with the scene by scene and go from there?
Sure, but I'll say it at the top before I forget and don't say it later. Follow us on all the things. Find us on Instagram. Like and subscribe. Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening. And yeah, leave comments and stuff. I think we're going to start doing some bureau requests maybe towards the end of the year. That'd be cool.
We're running out of stuff on our list, so
yeah.
More recommendations the better. So
for sure.
Post them in the comments on Apple, on YouTube, social media.
For sure.
You know where to find us. So,
yep.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, so yes, 28 Days Later, directed in 2002, 2001, 2002, by Danny Boyle. We open with a lot of chaotic scenes happening. It looks like it's all over the world. Just some, carnage, murder, damage. People are rioting. It's all very destructive. And we kind of pan out and we actually see that these are monitors that a monkey is watching and is also hooked up to a monitor itself. So they're clearly showing this monkey these terrible scenes and then seeing what happens to its brain or like whatever. We then see security cameras and someone's in a mask covering the cameras. We quickly find out they are animal rights activists. There's 3 of them, 2 males and a female, and they have broken into this testing facility to free these animals. They're taking pictures, opening cages, but oh crap, a scientist walks in, and he tries to call security, but they stop him. And he's like, no, you don't understand. All these animals are infected. They've been infected with rage. You can't let them go.
And what do? They let them go.
Right. And my day job is in animal research. And I realize why people don't like that. And we're not doing anything, obviously, like
You're not injecting monkeys with rage and causing a potential outbreak, a zombie
outbreak. Right. No. But this whole, like, scene isn't that weird to me to see it. So, I get it. I get what's happening here. But we quickly see, though, after they start letting them out of the cages, that they bite them. They bite the woman first. Then she immediately turns and pukes on one guy's face. So that gets him infected. And then one of them kills the doctor. It's just a whole, chain of events that leads to everybody dies.
Yeah. I found out that like working with chimps in movies, you can only work with them up until they're like 7 or 8 years old because they start to get more difficult to work with. Shocker, because it's, a chimp and they rip people's faces off.
Yeah. Well, and they're not, as much as we could get into a whole tangent on it, but I won't. But as much as we want to, whether you believe in evolution or whatever, the way their brains work and how they process things are obviously very similar to ours. So just think of it as like a toddler working. They get frustrated. They get upset. They can't articulate why they're upset sometimes either. So people take a lot of that as aggression too. I have worked with chimps and monkeys before, and they can be super sweet one minute and then, throwing poop or trying to get at you the next. It's just, they're animals. They're not made to be shooting movies and in cages and stuff. So, they're animals. It is what it is. But the screen then cuts to black, and we see 28 days later on white text at the very bottom.
That's the name of the movie.
Wow. They said the name of the movie.
They said the name of the movie.
We then see a man in a hospital bed who is Jim, Cillian Murphy. He's totally naked, by the way.
Totally spread out.
Yeah, and I thought that was weird. You would be in a gown of some sort, even if you're in a coma, which he clearly was or is coming out of. But he is hooked up to a bunch of machines that are dead because there's no sound. But he starts yelling for help, kind of trying to get out of the room. Luckily, there's a key that was shoved under the door, but it is locked. So I'm assuming that whoever was working in the hospital locked him in there and then put that key there, maybe.
I would assume, just in case he did wake up and was able to make his way out.
Right.
It's kind of protecting him because he's, clearly it would just be dead weight to anybody who tried to, pull him out of there, so.
Yeah, I also wonder, too, because we'll kind of get into it when we start talking about these types of zombies if you want, but if you're dead or not moving, would they even attack him? I would think so, because, if you take a look at a lot of, the Walking Dead zombies, for example, they can, they also go off of, smell. And, there's a lot of different ways that, zombies are portrayed in cinema, but they all kind of roughly follow the same kind of rules. This one is very different, because this one was the film that kind of introduced the idea of, the fast-paced running zombie. Right. Right.
But I know that, because you see in The Walking Dead, a lot of times the way that they disguise themselves in hordes is to cover themselves in guts to kind of mask their odor. So. Oh,
okay. I guess we don't really see it in this movie, how the infected really find you, besides the obvious, they're making noise and
light noises. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so he gets up out of the room. He finds some clothes, some scrubs. He's still, wandering around the hospital that's clearly vacant. He gets to some payphones. Those are dead. Finally gets to a vending machine to get something to drink. I'm sure he's parched.
Downs a Pepsi.
Yeah.
Totally not totally not sponsored by Pepsi.
No, not throughout the whole movie at all.
No. It's funny because I know that I was watching some of the behind the scenes stuff, and apparently they got a lot of shots of dead bodies and stuff around, but they ended up not using any of that footage because they just kind of wanted it to make it look even more empty inside this hospital to make it a little more ominous. So,
well, and the whole he's walking out at this point, and he's close to downtown London, and it's completely abandoned. There's trash everywhere. Cars tipped over, buses, and he just keeps yelling and walking. I always thought, too, in this beginning scene, it was weird that none of the infected found him before now.
Right.
Because he's just walking around yelling.
Well, there was,
a good 10 minutes.
Because you see, later as he starts looking at all the newspapers and stuff, they, evacuated the city at one point. So even though there are infected clearly still in London, a majority of the people seem to have gotten out.
Yeah.
And I had heard a rumor at some point that the scene where he's walking across the bridge, that that they didn't shut down the bridge at all. There's apparently this one time during the day in London where it's just dead quiet. That is not the case at all. They definitely did have to shut down the bridge and block the road so that they could shoot this. Granted, they had very limited time, but with one of the perks of shooting digital is that, less equipment that you have to set up and everything. So they were able to, knock out the shots that they needed very quickly. So, police were very willing to cooperate because they were able to get everything done so quickly.
Yeah, which is cool. Cool of everybody involved, So he's, walking around abandoned London. Everything's empty. He does set off a car alarm, which again, I'm like, how did nobody come out of the woodwork here? But whatever. Then we do see the newspaper with the evacuation notation on it, and he realizes, oh shit, I am probably alone here. But he's still very confused, obviously, and doesn't know what's happening. We see him enter a church that also seems abandoned. The very ominous words written on the stairs, repent, the world is extremely fucking nigh, which is creepy. And as he climbs these stairs, he kind of looks out into the pews and you just see a sea of dead bodies. So I don't know if these people took their own lives or
I think the idea was that they basically, like, with all the dead, they basically turned the church into, like, a cemetery because they couldn't just, like, bury all these people that were dying so quickly. At least that's what I heard with some of the behind the scenes, is that that was the idea, was that, during this whole thing, they just turned it into an open cemetery, essentially.
I didn't even think of that. I thought they went to the church to, kill themselves, and they're in the church, so maybe. They're there. Yeah. I don't know. No, I'm sure you're right, though.
Yeah. But that was the idea that I first got to, is that it was like some kind of mass suicide thing, I'm guessing. But
yeah. Which would be, either one would be very sad.
Yeah.
But he does say hello again, and then a couple people stand up and look at him, and we're like, that's startling in itself.
Yeah.
And they at first don't move, but then we hear banging on a door to, I think, his right, and then a priest comes stumbling out, and he is clearly infected. And again, Jim isn't sure what's happening, but he does hit him across the head with the bag he's carrying, and it does knock him over kind of out of the way, and he does run away and gets out of there. But he runs down the stairs, and the other infected chase after him. He starts running through the streets, and there's, I think, more people now are more infected are following him.
Because I think some of the ones that were like down with the bodies started like running out of the church. So
no, definitely, but I think some more start to as well, because it ends up being like 6 or 7 of them are chasing him. But then all of a sudden a Molotov cocktail is thrown over his head, basically, and it hits some of the infected, and a woman starts yelling at him to keep going, and we just see more Molotov cocktails, and then all of a sudden a huge explosion, and it looks like an entire gas station gets blown up, and that kills whoever.
It's funny because you can clearly see, like, now it's nighttime, and it seemed to have gotten dark really quickly. And I think that's because, like, when you're dealing with fire and it's such, so bright that you have to, like, stop your cameras down, the exposure on your camera down really far, so that way it's not just constantly blowing out the image. And so I think they used a little bit of that so that way they could properly capture the fire and, like, because of how bright it is. And so they were like, well, we'll just make it nighttime so that way it makes sense. Because when you're dealing with, like, digital cameras and the small sensors on those things.
So. Right. For sure. We do also get kind of a cool shot over the explosion, and since the city is,
you see the big city, and then you just, like, this small explosion.
But, and that's all you see.
Yeah, because they were I remember with some of the behind the scenes stuff they were talking about is like, well, they have to, like, make the explosion look as real as possible because fake special effects like that can really draw you out of a movie a little bit because we're competing against what Michael Bay was putting out early in his career at this time. So
it can also be really expensive, I'm assuming, too.
Right. Yeah.
So excuse me, there's Jim now and 2 other people, the 2 that saved him, essentially. So the 3 of them get to a safe place, and the man has a gas mask on, and initially he tries to tell him a joke. Maybe this is like a test, like, are you infected? Are you going to be coherent?
It was like, I remember I chuckled a little bit when I first heard it. It was something about, like, a giraffe going into a bar and dying, and the bartender saying, hey, you can't leave that lion there. And he goes, it's not a lion, it's a giraffe.
I don't remember the joke, but I'm sure you're right.
I thought it was funny.
He doesn't get it though. No, Jim doesn't.
Well, he's just so like out of it at this point because it's just like being chased by, humans that are clearly trying to kill him, and then you just watch two of them burn and watch the gas station explode, and now he's trapped in a gas station with two random people.
Right, and he just woke up, so he, Mark. Then we learn his name is Mark, and then the woman is Selena. They get introduced, and Selena asks him, well, you're from the hospital, yeah, because you have scrubs on. And he says, well, I didn't work there. I was a bike messenger, and I was taking a package somewhere. A car went in front of him, and then he woke up in the hospital, and he thought he was hallucinating or dead because he has no idea what's going on. Mark then tells him that he's got some bad news. Selena goes on to say it started with rioting, but this was different because it was in small villages as well. And then it was just everywhere on the streets outside your own homes. And it was some sort of an infection in the blood. And by the time they tried to evacuate, it was too late. And the infected had overrun all the military blockades. And the last thing they heard broadcast on TV or radio was that the infection was also in Paris and New York. So it is spreading like globally. And then Jim says, well, what about the government? They had to be protecting people. And Mark and her both are like, they're gone. There is no more government. No police, no TV, no electricity. He asks them both where their families are. And Mark says, well, they're dead. Mine are dead, just like Selena's, and yours are probably dead too. But Jim does want to go look for his family and is like, I'll walk, whatever. Selena's like, okay, but you won't come back because nobody comes back. And then Mark says, lesson 1, you never go anywhere alone unless you have to. And then lesson 2, you never go anywhere in the dark unless you have to. So they'll go with him in the morning and look for his dead family tomorrow, which I thought was pretty morbid, but, Yeah. We cut to them walking. And they do get to Jim's parents' house. Selena says, look, if there's anyone in there, and before she can finish, she's like, yeah, I get it. Because, she's like, you got to kill him. Jim enters the house and starts to walk up the stairs. And he immediately gets hit with what I'm sure is like decay from what we're about to see now, unfortunately, is his parents are dead. And they are lying together. They've clearly been dead for a long time because they're withering away and decaying away. His mom is clutching a picture of him, and he covers them with a sheet, and on the back of the picture it says, Jim, with endless love, we left you sleeping. Now we're sleeping with you. Don't wake up, which is very ominous.
Yeah.
And sad.
It's a very crushing scene, and it just is. What must be going through Jim's head right now, because he couldn't have this is less than 24 hours from him waking up from a 4-week-long coma, waking up to a hospital that's completely empty, being attacked by people in a church, seeing a sea of dead people in this church, and then and then just finding out that your family is dead, and just like literally having your entire world taken away from you in less than a day.
Yeah, I know. I can't imagine. Yeah. It's very, shocking and tragic, because then we do see Jim is just crying in his room, and he's clearly, coming to terms with this, but also he's very upset. We cut to Selena saying, well, at least they died peacefully and he should be grateful, basically. And then Mark tells him this story about his family and how they were at a train station with his mom, dad, and sister, and trying to get a train out of the city. But the crowd was surging, and he lost his grip on his sister's hand. And when he looked down, he remembers the ground being soft, and he didn't know why, but then he realized he was standing on people, not the floor. So they, were trampled. But at that point, the infected were everywhere, so he just was the only one that survived and got out. Selena kind of has a similar story about her family, but again, they kind of reiterate that he should just be grateful that he didn't have to see anything like that with his family. Selena says it's late, and they shouldn't travel again at night, so they should all sleep there, but in the same room because it's safer. We then see Cillian and Mark sleeping, but Jim is awake, and he does light a candle. Then we kind of see this like dream sequence of him.
It's like him imagining, had he woken up and just gone home to see his parents.
Right. Like what would have happened if that was the case. But then, oh shit, 2 infected come bursting through the door and from the top of a skylight, which we didn't see until now. And Selena and Mark kill them. And Selena yells at Jim, you bitten? Is there any blood in your mouth? He says no, but then we pan over and we see Mark was unfortunately bitten. Mark tells her to wait, but she just chops his ass to pieces with her machete.
Just wails on him.
Mm-hmm.
R.I.P.
Just
Mark.
Immediately. Yep. I thought it was kind of interesting, Jim's reaction to this, because he had none.
Right. Yeah. It was
weird.
I think Jim is just kind of checked out at this point. Like, he has just been hit with so much at this point that he's just kind of emotionally numb. If you want to look at it from a logical standpoint as to why he probably had no reaction other than maybe they just didn't write it into the scene.
Right.
But.
Or maybe that's kind of how they wanted him to act. I don't know. Because he does a really good job at
it. Because, Cillian Murphy, he's been in a bunch of stuff since this. I can't say that I recognize any, other than Christopher Eccleston, who was in other stuff. But, they wanted to use actors that weren't super well known to kind of add a little bit more to the realism. Because, and directors will do this from time to time, is that they will use less famous actors so that way you're not distracted by, it's like if you made this movie today and Chris Pratt was in it, it would kind of take it out of a little bit, but having people that you don't recognize adds a little bit more realism to it.
Yeah, I get you. Get what you're saying. For sure. Selena does tell Jim, though, to go ahead and change and get cleaned up because there will be more infected to come, so they got to get out of there. We then cut to Selena and Jim walking together in the dark, which is sketchy, but they had to. And he basically is just like, well, how'd you know about Mark? And she says, well, it's in the blood, and if someone gets infected, you have between 10 and 20 seconds to kill them or they'll kill you. And he basically... there's this little back and forth where she's arguing like nothing really matters except staying alive. So this is what we got to do. We just get this vibe that Selena has seen so much shit that and done shit that she's
she's kind of like, world's fucked. You just got to deal with it and keep surviving. And and that's kind of like her whole thing throughout the movie. And it's Jim trying to, still hold on to humanity a little bit.
Yeah. There's that parallel between the two of them as characters for sure. Mm-hmm. But Jim looks up and says, "What's that?" And we do see some blinking lights in an apartment building that are pretty high up. So they head towards that building. There's tons of shopping carts stacked up high to block the entrance of the stairs, it looks like. So they climb over that and they're walking up the stairs. There's a lot of stairs. The building they're trying to, or the apartment, I guess they're trying to reach is really high up.
It's England. We have to call them flats.
You're right. The flat is towards the top. Jim is kind of lagging behind, and Selena asks him if he needs a break, and he's like, yeah, I do. I feel like shit. She asks him what's wrong, and he says, I just have a really bad headache. She's like, well, no shit. You've only been eating a bunch of sugar and even then you haven't really eaten a lot. So she's like, all we can do is pump you full of medicine and give you some more sugar. Yep. So she pulls out some pop and some aspirin. But then before they can do anything, we hear screaming and we see some infected running towards the stairs. And they just scale those carts like it's nothing. And they're over in 2 seconds flat. So they have to start running up the stairs now. So they're running up the stairs. Jim's yelling at her not to leave him. And then a man in full riot gear steps out and kind of scares both of them, but tells them, go down the hall, flat E3 or whatever is where you want to go. So Selena gets to the door, but the girl on the other side won't open it until she knows her dad's okay, and he's basically like killing these infected. I think there's only a couple of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of them, yeah, because he's able to, I mean, Frank, who we find out is the guy in the full body armor, is able to just take him out real quickly. But
yeah. He does yell at his daughter, who we then learn her name is Hannah, to open the door. So they all go in the flat. And he introduces himself as Frank. This is his daughter, Hannah. And he's very excited people are here. But Hannah seems pretty shy and standoffish. And he says, well, now it's a celebration. What do we have to offer? And she says, the only thing we have is Mom's creme de menthe, which is cute. Because he does bring out some fancy glasses and creme de menthe, which is a terrible liqueur. And it's basically just liquid sugar and mint flavoring. Yeah. That's really gross. But then he turns around and unplugs the Christmas lights that were blinking from a battery. So that's how they were getting power there. We then see Jim shaving, but he is just mauling his face because, unfortunately, Frank knocks and says, we can't use the water because it got turned off and we need to save it for, you know, more important things than shaving your face. But Jim does open the door, and Frank says, well, he's going to turn in, but they do have a spare room for him and Selena if he wants it. And Jim's like, no, we're not together. I'll just sleep in the living room. But he does thank him again for, you know, his help in letting them stay there. I love Frank. He's definitely one of my favorite characters in the movie.
He's a sweetheart.
Because he's just, he's so sweet. He's the dad figure, the good dad figure, and it's very sweet.
For sure.
Jim then enters a room where Selena is, and he's like, you know, what do you think of them? And she says, well, they need us more than we need them, obviously. But Jim says they seem like good people, so... And we kind of pan over to a picture of Frank, Hannah, and her mother, who isn't there. So we're assuming she's dead. Or, you know, something happened to her. Selena says, well, that's fine, but he should be concerned if they're going to actually slow them down. She then says, you know, whatever, it's fine, we're here now, and I'm going to get some sleep. And Jim says, you don't get it. You don't think I get it, but I do. I know I'd be dead if you didn't save me. So he also thanks her, and then they go to bed for the night. And then we just get another kind of cool shot of like abandoned London in the dark, which is cool. We then see Frank on the roof with Jim, telling him the water was cut out 3 days ago, but they thought they'd be fine with the rain that would come because it's London. And we see tons of buckets on the roof. We see sheets. But unfortunately, it hasn't rained in 10 days, so he can't, you know, catch any rain.
I love seeing the laundry baskets that are there to catch the water. The whole
right?
So apparently, the production had only gotten, like, around 100 buckets. And so they have this big wide shot where you can see, like, the roof and, like, the rest of the city. But with only, like, the 100 buckets, it looked very minuscule to the size of the roof of the building. And apparently, Danny Boyle, who directed the movie, like, from what I heard, kind of threw a fit on set about this whole thing and had production run out and get like 1,000 buckets that they covered the entire roof with.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so that way you could, you know, it looked a little bit more dramatic in that wide shot. But it works.
Yeah. So Frank says basically, he's like, we can't stay here because there's no water, we're going to run out of food, and we can't get in and out of this building easily without, you know, the carts and everything that are in the way. So Frank says, yes, they can't stay here, and he takes them out to their balcony. They're now back in the flat, and a radio transmission comes on, which Selena is like amazed at because she's like, we haven't heard anything for days or weeks or whatever. And he's like, just listen. And it's a military operation. They're telling them where to go. There's military there that could keep them safe, you know, the whole spiel. Frank says it would take them maybe 2 to 3 days, and Selena says and he's like, yeah, we heard you last night. Like, this flat isn't very the walls are thin, so you know, we do need you more than you need us, because I couldn't go by myself, because if something happened to me, Hannah would be alone, and, you know, he couldn't risk it. but with more people, they can at least try. Selena and him kind of argue a bit, but Hannah interrupts and says something really poignant. She's like, look, you need us too, because, you know, we aren't safe. You aren't safe. The more people that are together, that's good. So what's the harm?
I have to say, the actress who plays Hannah, at least in this film, because I can't say that I've seen anything else that she's in. She sucks in this movie. I'm just gonna put it out there. Like,
oh, you didn't like Hannah?
No, I mean, her character is fine, but just like, especially in this scene, like the way that it looks like she's just reading off. It almost is like she's just reading off of a script off camera. It's just the way that she talks, and it feels very disingenuine.
Yeah, I think that was part of her character too, though. Like, she's just...
I don't know. And
also kind of like Selena. I think that's why Selena bonds with her so quickly. I think Hannah's got a lot of the same mindset as Selena. So, and I think that's definitely... It carries through on her character, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I don't know. Maybe Hannah's character just has a little bit more of a... what's the word? She's just like... What's the opposite? Nihilistic, I guess? Yeah. I think that's right. But
I see what you're saying, yeah.
But just, I don't know. It's just the way that she, like, reads her lines. It just, I don't know. It seems very, you know, this is one of the crew members' kids and we needed a kid for the movie type thing, you know? I don't know.
Well, her acting is also very British. Because if you haven't watched a lot of British television or TV, which I have, as I love it, they are stoic, they're monotone, they don't show a lot of emotion. That's a British thing. So that could be part of it too. That she's just, you know, a British actress.
I guess. I mean, my experience with British television is, you know, the first, like, 7 seasons of Doctor Who, excuse me, the first 7 seasons of Doctor Who and IT Crowd, where everybody is very, you know, energetic with their roles, so.
Yeah, English drama is very different than English comedy.
Gotcha.
And it's all different from what we do, so. But I think that's part of it, too. I think she's a little more stoic of a person. She's definitely mature for her age. And it's kind of a Selena mini-me. She's like, I've seen shit too, so I'm just here to survive and, you know.
Makes sense, yeah.
Because we see emotion from her later, but it's warranted. So I just don't think she's that kind of a kid. But Jim says, well, how are we going to get there? And then we see a scene of a taxi driving up, and they're all in the taxi. So he had this stored somewhere, or he... stored it whenever shit started going down.
I think the whole thing was that I think he was a taxi driver prior to the outbreak.
Right.
I think was the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. So they do arrive at a tunnel, though, and Frank says this is the quickest route. And Jim's like, well, we should go the indirect route then because this is sketchy and it's underground. And Frank's like, whatever, it's just fat. Let's just get it done with. So they drive into this tunnel, and then Frank just, like, floors it over a bunch of cars that are obviously parked there. And he does make it over the cars, but he gets a flat tire. It's like, F. It's the worst thing that could have happened.
Yeah. And then we get Jim's I told you so moment.
Yep, which he's right. He told you so. So they have to change it right then and there, though, obviously, but it's sketchy. So Hannah gets out and she gets the tire off, getting ready to put the new one in. And then Jim's like, wait, do you hear that? And we just see tons of rats coming toward them. And Selena yells, they're running from the infected. And, so gross. And poor Hannah's on the ground. Yeah. So she's getting
like under the car. I don't know what she's doing under the car, like to change the tire. I don't know.
I don't know either. Why she would specifically be under the car, but
yeah, just getting run over by all these rats.
Yeah, it sucks. So we then see the infected, and they quickly, get the tire fixed, and everyone's yelling at her, but she's like, okay, I got it. And they do take off just in time before they get to the car. They then come upon a supermarket that somehow still has power. question
And it's
mark.
still completely stocked with the door not locked or anything. And it's a glass door, too.
Right. And there's no one in there. There's no infected in there. There's no people, dead bodies. There's no nothing.
How convenient.
Right. But they all do grab a cart and basically fill it to the brim. And we see, the girls grabbing candy, Frank and Jim getting some booze, and they all load up the car and get going. We then get to a gas station and we hear Frank say, look, we got to do this now or we're walking. So this looks sketchy, though. It's abandoned, but, it's also very open. So I think if people were to attack them, they wouldn't have a lot of,
ways to defend themselves or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I got that vibe for sure. But Jim wanders into the gas station that appears empty, but then there's a little boy that comes up behind him and he's infected, so Jim has to kill him, which is sad. But he also beats him to death because, he's got to survive.
I love how, it's like the kid just runs up behind him and Jim just knows to, swing the bat right behind him. Also, I love how the guy that just got out of a coma is probably weak as all hell, gets the one woman that takes the gets the one weapon that takes the most blunt force and momentum to do any kind of damage, and he gets the baseball bat, where Selena has her machete, which I would feel like it makes more sense to give that to Jim, because it would probably take less energy to, swing the machete and actually do some damage, because the weight of the blade's going to do most of the work for you. But I don't know. I can't help but look too far into this kind of stuff. But
I also think some of it's just he probably wasn't anticipating actually having to kill anybody with it.
Yeah.
But he does. Frank gets the gas and tells Hannah to pull the car around, and she does this cute little thing of like a Fast and Furious move where she pulls the car around. But they're now driving down a more abandoned highways, and we do arrive at a little stone outlook type area. It's like ruins because it probably was a castle or something at some point, and those are obviously all over London. But they're eating and kind of carrying on and having a good time, and it's actually a really pretty scene, the outside, and then we see a bunch of wild horses running around. And Frank says, hey, look at this. And they all, take in the beauty that is this moment of not a whole bunch of shit going wrong around them. Mm-hmm. So then we see Frank and Hannah kind of messing around. We see Jim and Selena walking around, just kind of talking back and forth. And she basically admits at this point that she was wrong and she needs people too. And even with all the death and stuff, that doesn't mean anything to Frank and Hannah because they have each other. So staying alive is not the only thing that's important. Mm-hmm. Clearly the relationships are
basically Selena's character arc at this point,
right? Because she's realizing she wants to be around people. Mm-hmm. So she kisses Jim on the cheek, and Frank says it's getting late, so they better stay there tonight, which at first I thought would be sketchy to just sleep outside, but I guess you would hear anybody coming near you because there's nothing, around there. So I guess it's fine. Jim and Hannah, though, it's nighttime now, and Jim and Hannah can't really sleep. But apparently Selena was fine, so they wake her up real quick, and she pops up with her machete in her hand, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd do the same, probably. I'd sleep with it for sure. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, how'd you get to sleep? And she's like, here, and tosses them Valium. And this is when we find out she was a chemist. So she probably made the pills. Jim is like, sweet. Well, at least if we get killed now, we won't care because we'll be on Valium.
Yeah.
And he wants to give Hannah one, but Frank's like, no, at first. And then he's like, come on, let her live. She can't sleep.
Yeah.
Right? And he does end up letting her take half a pill. We then see another kind of dream sequence where Jim has woken up and he's all alone. He's woken up in the place he's in now, though, but he is all alone and he's yelling and yelling. And Frank kind of walks over and gently wakes him up and says, "Hey, you're just having a bad dream." And Jim turns over and says, "Thanks, Dad."
Thanks, Dad.
And which is so sweet because you see the look on Frank's face. And he's like, I don't know this person very well, but clearly his dad is gone. And it's just very sweet.
Yeah.
Another sweet moment with Frank because he is a very cool guy. Mm-hmm. The next scene is the same dream sequence we just saw. Jim kind of waking up alone, but it's from a car horn, and it's Selena telling him they're about to leave, so get up and let's get going. So they keep going on their journey. More abandoned roads. We keep hearing the same transmission on the radio from the soldiers. Hannah and Selena, we see them playing cards in the back, and Jim's in the front, kind of sticking his head out, letting the air wash all over him. They finally get to Manchester, which is their destination, and they cross the bridge and kind of pull around, and we see the base, but it does look abandoned.
Well, we also, as they're pulling up, they see the entire city of Manchester is on fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Most of it's on fire.
Yeah.
There's smoke everywhere, and yeah. But I don't know how big Manchester is.
It's probably just like the city area. I don't know. I don't know anything about the UK and where everything's at.
I know a little bit, and I'm going next year.
Oh, nice.
So I will see how big it is. But they aren't split up into, obviously, we have states. That's not how they're split up. They have villages and cities. Obviously, villages are smaller than cities. So I just don't know how big that would be, to scale of how, if it's burning, how much of that is really, devastating.
Yeah.
But they get out of the vehicle, though, and kind of start walking around. And Hannah's like, well, I don't get it. Did they leave? And Frank is clearly upset, but he's determined not to leave until he checks all the vehicles. And he's just, so hopeful at this point that somebody is going to be there. And somebody's there and they're going to be safe, that he just gets upset. And he does yell at Hannah and Selena. And he kind of walks off because he does snap at them to, cool off. And this scene gets me every time. I tear up a little bit. I can't help it. So there's a fucking crow above him, but there's also a dead body hanging up there that the crow is eating.
Yeah.
So the crow is squawking. Frank walks over and kind of yells at him. And as soon as he looks up at this crow, a drop of blood, that's it, falls in his eyeball. And no! It's
that's
so
it
sad.
For Frank.
That's it for Frank.
Rest
he knows immediately
Frank.
what happens.
Yeah.
So he tells Hannah that he loves her very much, but to keep back. But he also apologizes for yelling at her. And then Selena knows immediately. She's like, fuck, he's turned. She yells at Jim to kill him because he's infected. Obviously, Jim hesitates. But he does lift up the bat, and just as he's about to hit him, Frank gets riddled with bullets. So if he had just waited 5 more minutes, that they would have been fine. But unfortunately, Frank is now dead. So Hannah also very devastated at this as well. But we then see them getting hauled off in trucks with the soldiers, and they go to a manor. So there's tons of these all over England too. In the cities, outside the cities, there's all these estates, essentially. The commanding officer introduces himself as Major Henry and says they have beds and clean sheets and hot water for a shower, and invites them in.
It's Christopher Eccleston, who was the 5th Doctor. No, that's not right. I'm not right about that at all. He's the 9th Doctor.
I didn't know he was a doctor.
Yeah, well, he was the 9th Doctor. So when they rebooted it in the early 2000s, well, it's not really a reboot. They kind of continued it. He was only in the first season of that, and then David Tennant took over for the next 2 or 3 seasons, and then
I love David Tennant.
Yeah, but then Matt Smith took over, and I lost interest.
I think I've only seen David Tennant and the chick. What's her name? I forget her name. She's in a bunch of other British stuff I love too.
The girl, the new girl doctor, or okay. Mm-hmm. I thought you were talking about Rose Tyler, who was the love interest for David Tennant's character.
No, the new girl doctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've
watched those seasons.
I've seen a few of the what's his name? Peter Capaldi ones, who is actually a distant cousin of Louis Capaldi, who I really enjoy his music. Anyway, this is not a Doctor Who podcast, but...
Right. But clearly we like Doctor Who, so... Hannah at this point is just really upset, so they're all in a room together, and Jim's trying to comfort her, and Hannah's asleep at this point, but Selena's just like, I don't want her to cope. And at this point, we really see a turn in Selena where she's like upset at, she wants to take care of Hannah now. But Jim and Selena then start kissing and make out a little bit, but then she storms off because that's too much feeling probably for her.
Too much emotion going on. Way to go, Jim. Right. You blew it.
Right. Well, he didn't. We find out
he didn't, but...
No.
He very easily
But
could've.
At this moment, yeah. We then cut to Jim and Major Henry walking around the grounds, basically, and he's like, obviously you heard our broadcast, but I'm sure this isn't what you were expecting. This is still the answer to infection. It just starts slow, and it starts with, people coming together and being safe, and he then tells them, again, walking around the manor, like how they're keeping it safe. They've got traps here and there, and obviously the walls and stuff to keep the infected out. And then finally he shows him to Mailer, who is a soldier who got infected 2 days ago. He's chained outside, and they wanted to learn from him initially, and Jim's like, well, what the fuck are you going to learn from him? And Henry's like, well, in a way, I've learned. He's telling me how long exactly it takes the infected to starve to death.
He gets a little bit further into it. He's like, well, it shows that there is no future beyond this point of turning. But then, it'll show how long it takes for them to starve,
It's depressing and gross. Yeah. We then cut to dinner, and all the soldiers are cheering and singing. And Jim, Hannah, and Selena, though, just look sad. Like, they need some time to, like, cope with what happened to them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they want to be around these people right now, which is totally understandable. There's apparently a type of feast prepared, though, and the chef cooked an omelet, and everyone's excited about the omelet. But then as soon as Henry takes a bite of it, he realizes the eggs were bad.
Yeah, basically inedible.
Yeah, so that sucks. But then... So everyone's kind of eating, and we see another soldier. I think he's the sergeant, if I'm correct. Yeah. He kind of goes on this little rant about how,
humans have only been around for a blink of an eye, and, if they all get wiped out, then that is the return to normality.
Right. It's poignant.
Yeah.
And Henry kind of interrupts and says, look, this is what I've seen in the 4 weeks since infection. So it's only been 4 weeks, and this is already how far their society has completely broken down, which I think is terrifying if you think about it. That's not very long. I would think it'd take longer.
I mean, it took us 4 months to go into a complete lockdown.
I mean, that's true. So, if you think about, like, what if we did get a virus like that was airborne?
Yeah.
It would spread so fast.
A huge part of the inspiration behind this movie was, because I think the UK was hit really bad with the foot and mouth disease that was, being spread across animals.
He also took a lot from Ebola.
Yeah, but it's they mentioned, like, some of the filmmakers in their interviews talk about is like, yes, this film is for entertainment, but it's also very much a warning. Like, these mass diseases make up a huge percentage of, what is killing people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's just like now with COVID, obviously. This isn't new. Mm-hmm. There's been COVID strains around the world for, lots of years. Yeah. But B, the fact that it's so transmittable so easily is scary. Mm-hmm. And we're 2 steps away from something like this happening where people are just going to massively get wiped out.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to kill everybody.
There's a video from a YouTube channel called Vsauce3, where they talk about how there's basically this parasite that infects ants, and causes them, it basically takes over their brain, and it causes them to kind of grow this antenna out of the back of their head that releases these like spores, and it infects the other ants around them. It's just basically a zombie virus within ants. And the whole idea behind the video is like, what if this, mutates and is able to spread to humans?
Which, if you think about every major disease that has wiped out humans, they have all come from animals. Animals transmit to us. It's not the other way around. We don't normally get animals sick. So, yeah, it's literally only a matter of time. If we don't have better protocols in place for keeping distance from animals so we don't get diseases from them, if we don't have better medicine, if we don't have better access to medicine, like all the things are going to just, this is where we'll be. It'll be 4 weeks and an entire country is in ruins.
Yeah.
So Henry's basically saying like, I've seen people killing people in the 4 weeks since infection, then the 4 weeks before that, and before that. And, that is normal to him, which is also sad.
Yeah.
It's also grim because it is a good representation of military life, I suppose. Selena then tells Hannah to eat, but Hannah says she doesn't want to. She wants to bury her dad. And she kind of looks at Officer Henry and says, he's one of those people you're talking about. Like, he's dead. So, he kind of nods at her and understands. I'm sure it's hard for her and difficult. But then we hear a loud explosion and all the soldiers get up and start yelling, grab their guns. Sirens start going off and lights are popping on around the grounds. We hear gunfire. And we see some of the infected have gotten onto the grounds, and the soldiers are just kind of shooting at them until they're dead, obviously. Then one steps on a landmine. Selena then is standing in the doorway with her machete, and one of the soldiers is like, hey, you don't need that anymore, and kind of tries to grab it from her. But Jim steps in, and, he's being an asshole for sure,
right.
But Jim steps in and is like, hey, fuck off. And then they kind of get in a fight. And then the sergeant from earlier, the philosophical guy, hits that soldier with a bat to get him off of Jim.
I think he hits him with the butt of his rifle.
Is it? I couldn't tell or remember. Yeah. Henry then tasks them all with different things. But he specifically says to the sergeant, you need to clean the bodies. So he does not like this guy at all.
Keep in mind that this lawn that he's go clean the bodies off the lawn. This lawn is filled with tripwires, claymores and landmines.
Right. I don't know why you would do that.
But then he does tell a group of the other guys to go help him too. So. Yeah,
but he clearly doesn't like him. Him and Jim go have a drink in another room, and Henry asks Jim who have you killed? Because if you hadn't done that, or if you had, you wouldn't be alive. So you've had to have killed somebody up to this point. He basically tells him, well, I killed a boy, but that's it. And Henry says, look, it's just all about survival. And he then says, I promised all the soldiers women. Because what else are 9 men going to do alone? Women mean a future. And I have to, fulfill that promise. Especially now that there actually are women here. And Jim, a light bulb goes off in his head, and he's like, oh, shit, I have to get them out of here. So he runs down to the girls' room and tries to get them up and leave, because obviously Henry means rape.
Yeah.
Because there's no way, they just met these people. I'm sure, again, it's just rape. He's inferring they're going to rape these women and make babies with them.
Keep in mind, Hannah is, between the ages of, 12 and 16.
Right. She's a child.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, she's a woman. She can have a baby.
Right.
So
this shit gets way darker super quickly.
Right. And it's very quick. I never really understood. You know what? Table it. When we get there,
okay,
I'll talk about it because I have some thoughts. So Jim's trying to get them out of there, but they run downstairs and Jim is quickly knocked out. He wakes up tied to, I think, a radiator, and the sergeant's there too. So, like, what did he do?
So I think there was something where, okay, so yeah, Jim is trying to get Selena and Hannah out of there. And at one point, one of them, hits Jim in the face and knocks him down, and he kind of passes out. And the sergeant catches on to what, he doesn't agree with what Henry and the rest of the troops are doing. So he's trying to, like, stand his ground. And, like, saying, like, he's like, they want to leave, let them leave. Like, we can't just hold them here. So he's trying to, like, defend Jim and the girls. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, they imprison Jim and the sergeant.
Right. Thank you. You are correct. Because when he wakes up, the sergeant's rambling on and on about how he's fucking crazy and this is wrong. And
now the whole country's been quarantined. Because he talks about, it's like, how could it have gotten, across seas and mountains? Well, if we look at COVID and, air travel, because in the beginning they talk about, like, when they're in the gas station, when Mark, Selena, and Jim are in the gas station, Selena mentions that, they had reported outbreaks in both Paris and New York. So this virus is already, worldwide at this point.
Right. But yeah, look at COVID. Didn't take long at all to get all the way around the world.
It took a month. It took a month to get from China to the U.S.
Yep. I believe it. Yeah. I believe it could definitely be, But pin that for later as well, that he mentions that. Yeah. Because now the asshole soldier and the chef soldier walk in with guns, and they're supposed to take them outside and essentially execute them. Mm-hmm. So they're walking through the woods, maybe. I don't know how far away this really is from the house. And we come upon just a ton of dead bodies. So this is like their dumping ground for all the bodies.
Which it's hard to say how many of these are just like, bodies they've cleared off the lawns, or if like this is an incident that they've run into before in the past couple weeks.
Yeah.
So
you don't know. They're just piled everywhere. Mm-hmm. So the asshole soldier goes to shoot the sergeant, but then the other chef guy
he goes to stab him with a bayonet. Because he attaches his bayonet, and the sergeant's like, "Oh, you're gonna stick me like a dog? You're not gonna just shoot me and put me down quickly?" Because the chef soldier is like, "No, just get it over with. Just do it quick."
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's why he shoots him. Mm-hmm. But also, when he shoots him, it scares the asshole soldier, and he turns around to yell at him, and then Jim dips out and runs away.
Well, he hides in the bodies.
Yeah. But at first we see him just run, out of camera frame. Mm-hmm. But then, yes, he very smartly hides in the dead bodies. I always think that's very smart. Mm-hmm. Because they go looking for him and they wouldn't look there. So then we see he does get away, though, and he jumps over the wall. Mm-hmm. But it's out of the manor. So they're like, well, he doesn't have a gun, so he's going to be dead. Who cares? Mm-hmm. And they basically go back to the house. But not before we see Jim lying on the ground catching his breath, and he looks up and there's a plane in the sky. So there's life somewhere. Mm-hmm. Something's happening with that plane. So the quarantine thing doesn't sound so crazy.
Right. Yeah.
At least to me, that's where my brain went with it.
Yeah.
We then cut to Henry telling Selena and Hannah that they need to make them look like proper ladies, of course, because if I'm going to rape you, you got to look like a woman. Gross. And luckily, the lady of the house left behind clothes, so...
Which both are the same dress that are in two separate sizes.
Right. They are the same dress. Yeah. Exact same dress. But Hannah's crying at this point, and Selena's just trying to, like, hold her and calm her down. They get the dresses, put them into a room, and the soldiers start stripping them of their clothes, which these scenes always piss me off because, one, here's our table information. These men think they're entitled to have sex with these women. Rape or not, they just think they can, so it's fine. And it's just so garbage. And I'm not sure why this was even a part of the movie. Like, why did you have to include this?
I think it's just to add a sense of, like, granted, they could have definitely done this a lot differently and still probably have gotten the point across. It's to add that, it's like, they feel safe now that they're with the soldiers, but it's like, oh, now maybe they're not safe. And I understand the whole, like, they gotta repopulate the world, but maybe rape isn't the way to go about that. There's my 2 cents.
There's also got to be other people. If there's them that found them, maybe it will be other people at some point.
Right.
I just don't see the point of doing all of this. To make them bad, I guess.
To make them bad, to add that extra shock factor as, like, a horror film or, like, I don't know.
Yeah. It just made me think that, the women thing, that they didn't like women. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Selena tells them, look, you need to leave me alone with Hannah because he wants us to look nice, so they need to leave, and it's just polite, so please give us a few minutes. So they do leave, but Selena grabs her pills and tries to give Hannah some of her pills, and Hannah's like, wait, are you going to kill me? And she's like, no, I just don't want you to care.
That was super gut-wrenching for me, just the idea of that. It's just, oh, God, thinking about it, just, I hate that. I hate that so much. Me too.
It always makes me think of, like, addicts that either sell their bodies to get drug money or something like that, or the opposite, if you're like trafficked or something and you start using drugs to cope with that. It's so sad, and it always makes you think of stuff like that. But one of the soldiers busts in the room and grabs the pills from her, but just then the sirens start to go off, and Selena thinks it's Jim, so that she's happy at this point. We do see Jim though, and he is cranking that siren. So they take off after him in a vehicle. I think it's only Henry and another soldier that initially take off in the vehicle. But it's pouring down rain now, which I always think is ironic after we heard the speech from Frank that it hasn't rained in so long.
Right, yeah. It's like, oh, how convenient.
And now it's raining and he's not with us, so. Jim is near the gate, though, the initial gate they came in. And one guy kind of sees him jumping over on the roof, so he starts walking up this ladder, I think, or like stairs or something. And then Henry's just shooting everywhere, just like mowing down, not aiming at anything. But then Jim does end up getting the guy that came up to the roof, killing him. And he actually puts him back in the vehicle, his dead body back in the vehicle. And
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I just like how Jim goes straight Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now mode on everybody. Just like straight, like, in the wild, shirtless, just running around. I just think that's
for
fun.
Sure. Yeah, he's like, I give no fucks now. I have to do this, and that's it. So Henry sees the body, tries to get in the vehicle, but Jim has probably done something to the vehicle because it doesn't start. Some infected come running up, and he does manage to shoot them and get away. Does he drive away or run away? He runs away, doesn't he?
Jim? Or Henry?
Henry.
So I think he runs away because he tries to start the car. There's an infected that, hops onto the hood, and then he shoots through the windshield. And so I don't think he drives.
I think you're right. So he runs away. It's nightfall now, though, and Jim is on the roof of the manor, and he ends up shooting Mailer free. So the one soldier... No, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. We then cut to Hannah and Selena in a room with the soldiers, and... Excuse me. One of the soldiers says he thinks he heard something. So asshole soldier goes to check it out. Hannah then turns to Selena and said, I think these pills are working because I'm not tired and I don't care. Which was really funny to like see that blankness on her face. Because then she starts taunting the soldiers and she's like, what if they don't come back? And then a few seconds later, she's like, I don't think they're coming back. And then a few seconds later, yeah, they're dead.
They're dead. And you're next. Which is funny. We then see Mailer at the window, and he busts through the window and pukes all over the one guy, turning him like almost instantly. Like he just unloads on this dude. Hannah and Selena take off running to try to get outside, but the asshole soldier stops them,
And they all kind of take off in the house at this point, just trying to get away from the infected, because we do see Mailer run through the camera shot there. We see the chef soldier. He's hiding in the kitchen. But he comes out of hiding and he runs to leave, but Jim actually stabs him. He runs right into Jim and Jim stabs him. We then see the other infected soldiers kind of going through the house. They take Selena and Hannah upstairs, but Hannah ends up running away down the hall, and she goes into, I think, the room she was initially in maybe, and she's looking at a picture of her family. Mm-hmm. But then she hears one of the infected come up, and she actually stands on the back of the mirror and holds herself up, which I thought was pretty dope.
Yeah, that was pretty clever.
Yeah, that looks hard to do, too.
Yeah, you can see that she's, like, hesitating, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, she's shaking, too, a little bit. The one infected does get really close to the mirror, though, but he does eventually leave the room, so she's safe. We then see Jim going around the house, basically trying to find them, but also avoid the infected. He goes into a room, and the last soldier is there hiding and says, like, look, man, I don't have any bullets. And then he initially shuts the door and blocks it, but not really well. Mm. So we see him jump out the window just as the infected come in and then eat that soldier that's in that room. Finally, we see the asshole soldier with Selena, and Jim has climbed through a skylight to try to get to them, but he's on the rafters. He does jump down and kind of bum rushes the guy and kind of mashes his head onto the, I don't know if it's brick.
I think it's a brick wall. Yeah.
Yeah. The wall. And then he ends up like poking his eyeballs,
I thought he took a bite out of him when I first saw it, but no, he's just like doing the eye gouging with the thumbs.
Yeah, which is obviously gross. Selena thinks he's infected, so she initially tries to kill him, and he's like, whoa, it's me. Mm-hmm. So they end up kissing again, but then Hannah pops in and hits him with a bottle because she also thought he was infected.
Having this nice, like, heartfelt, relief moment, and then just gets, and he just, like, still has, like, the scars and everything from his brain surgery, too.
Right. And it's like, ping, right on the head. For sure. It's super funny. So they end up getting outside, though. Selena grabs her machete. They get outside. And we see the door they pull the cab door open, because I think that's maybe the only vehicle he knows is working right now or something. But Henry is sitting there, and he's like, you killed all my men. And he just shoots Jim. No! Like, right in the stomach.
Yeah.
Which isn't good. But Hannah jumps in the cab and kind of backs the cab all the way up to the house. Mm-hmm. So then Mailer and the other soldiers break the window and pull him out. And you see her just... Yeah. You see her floor it, and now it's obviously Selena, Jim, and her in this vehicle. But Jim is still shot, so that's not good. So then they're driving down to the gate. Hannah says, shit, the gate's locked. Jim and Selena just yell at her to keep going. And we see a shot of Selena and Jim flying forward. And then the screen cuts.
That's the movie.
Yep, that's the movie.
Well, that actually originally was the movie. And then Fox saw the cut that Boyle had and gave them extra money to shoot another, like, in addition to the ending. Which is why all of the movie up until, like, that freeze frame is all shot on digital. And then they do have the ending scene that's actually shot on 35 millimeter film, because you can see the drastic difference in quality and, the look of the film overall. And the 35 millimeter, was to add a little bit, more, add a bit more of a clean picture, and to kind of help, and we'll get in, of course, get into this last scene here. But to add, kind of a hopefulness to this scene. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get the same font again, the 28 days later, and we get a quick flash of Jim in a hospital again, on a hospital bed, and Selena yelling at him not to die. And then we cut directly to Jim waking up in a bed, and they're clearly in some, like, cottage somewhere outside, probably whatever city or wherever they were, to save his life because he is alive. Then we get a quick shot of Selena sewing. Hannah's outside. We see her kind of placing things on the ground. And Jim walks out and he says, "Hey, you looked really good in this dress. Why'd you ruin it?" And then Hannah comes rushing in and says they're coming. They all rush outside and they have laid really large sheets on the ground to get people's attention that are flying over from the sky, because we do see a plane start to take, like, we see the point of view from the plane and they're going over, you know, the mountainsides and the grass, and we see some infected that are, I'm assuming, starving to death because they look like they're about to die. And the plane flies over all of them. They're jumping up and down and waving. Selena looks at Jim and says, "You think they saw us this time?" Jim smiles. And that's the movie.
Except it's not. Psych again. So there is a post-credit ending to this movie that
there is.
I was not aware of until I watched it again last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
yes, there is a post-credits if you watch all the credits.
Yes.
Yes. But go ahead, explain it, since you haven't seen it.
Basically, it is a continuation of the glimpses that we get after the freeze frame, and it's, you know, we see Selena trying to resuscitate Jim, and it's basically picking up from there. And it doesn't show them reviving Jim like you think it would. It shows Jim dying in this hospital.
Yeah.
And it's Hannah asking, "What do we do now?" And Selena says, "We keep moving." And then they just leave Jim behind in the hospital.
I have some bonus feature stuff about that, too.
Well, let's get into it.
Do you want to go over any of your video essay, or you want me to go first?
I mean, I've pretty much, you know, most of the research I do, and as we're talking about it, I kind of implement the facts that I have. So
Okay.
Let's get into the bonus stuff.
All right. So the director, Danny Boyle, doesn't consider this a zombie film. He actually credits this film with more of a social experiment, not a zombie film.
Yeah.
However, this film is credited with basically reinvigorating the zombie genre.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Based on when it came out, and then the fact that he used fast-running infected, which was new, and really hit some of that character drama stuff between, you know, all the characters he had. And then it did have a really modest budget, but it did obviously really well in the box office. It grossed more than $82.7 million worldwide on its opening weekend.
I mean, it did
really well.
It was very kind of low budget, though. I mean, they couldn't even pay their extras. I mean, their extras were literally paid in a cup of tea, which is the most English thing I've ever heard in my life.
It definitely is.
But yeah, so I mean, it's not, I mean, they definitely had some budget. A lot of it, you know, went into what special effects they could pull off with, like, the gas station explosion, for example. So
right.
But
right.
Yeah.
It said the initial budget that I could find online was only $8 million, so that's not a lot.
Oh, that's like very low budget. That's like kind of mid-budget indie movie right there.
For sure. Like you kind of mentioned, there is a post-credit scene where Jim dies. On the initial DVD release, there's actually 3 post-credits.
Really?
And all of them, Jim dies. He doesn't live in any of them.
Oh, poor Jim.
Yeah. I mean, it made sense. He got shot in the stomach.
Yeah.
And they're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the shoots that were composed, obviously shot in England. They were kind of how you mentioned, how they had the very coordinated efforts from the crew and police at times, whether it was shutting down motorways or the hospital scene that Jim wakes up in particular was actually closed on the weekends. So it allowed them to shoot there without disrupting anything, which I think is so odd.
Yeah.
That a hospital would be closed on the weekend, but they have socialized medicine, so it's different over there. Boyle also, the director, also had roads that they shot on that they would shoot at like weird hours, like 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. when there wasn't a lot of traffic.
Right, yeah. That was probably where I heard that bridge scene where in the beginning where Jim is walking across the bridge. That's probably, I might have just like misheard parts of it, but yeah.
No, you were right.
Yeah, well, I know that they did like shut some stuff down, but apparently, I guess they did actually, were able to shoot and like probably, I'm guessing like really early morning type stuff, or like before people are starting their commute.
Yeah, because they also have different. The way they work over there is a lot different than how we work here. Like we have all kinds of shifts, and people would be out at random times of the night. They don't function that way, which is another nice thing about England. Some of the scenes were shot on September 11th, 2001. Unfortunately, them being in England, they didn't know a lot of the things that were happening until later in the day.
Right.
So mainly, though, the picnic scene where they're all outside eating the food and having fun was actually shot as the towers were coming down. So all the actors thought that was really weird, that's how their shooting schedule lined up.
Yeah.
Danny Boyle did make the effort to shoot this entire film using DV-based Canon XL1 cameras, like you have mentioned a bunch.
Which, fun fact, they are also the same cameras used in the hit show iCarly. That was on Nickelodeon. It was the camera that Freddie used to shoot the show.
Oh my gosh.
So,
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, like you said, just that grittiness really benefited the overall script, I think, and the way the movie was put together. The reason for putting focus on the rage virus, Boyle said, was to criticize our society, which is doing very doing very little to deal with the culture of anger, violence, and honestly rape, because he mentioned that scene with the women. He wanted it in for a specific reason. The virus itself was designed to amplify the anger already in each of us rather than add a new disease to a zombie film. So like how zombies get infected from something, this is already something we have, and it just got dialed up to 10.
I saw one of the interviews with the producers. They were like, imagine it's like your worst like road rage experience amplified by 1,000,000, and that's basically what it is.
Yeah, they mentioned road rage a lot in a lot of the stuff I was reading. Danny Boyle cast professional athletes in a lot of the infected roles to make it look scarier and like people were really that fast.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because if you think about it, the average person probably isn't that fast,
right.
even if they're angry.
Right, yeah.
This film inspired a series of comics as well as a graphic novel called 28 Days Later, The Aftermath. The comics actually follow Selena, though, as she lives in a refugee camp near Norway because they have Hannah and Jim dying in the comics.
Wow.
And that's all I got. All
right. I like this movie a lot.
I do, too. And it's not a cult classic in the sense of...
Yeah.
It did poorly because this got amazing reviews.
Right.
Critics loved this movie.
I mean, it still kind of has a cult following if you're like a horror fan or a fan of zombies. And this movie was so influential in what would become of the zombie genre. I mean, basically, this movie is just season 1 of The Walking Dead.
Exactly.
And if you've ever seen the show Black Summer on Netflix, which I highly recommend. Because in my opinion, it's more like a more realistic Walking Dead.
Ooh, okay.
It's really cool, but it's basically the zombies are pretty much the same as how they are in 28 Days Later. Whereas, like, as soon as you get infected, it's just a matter of seconds. They're super, fast pace. But yeah, highly recommend that show. But yeah, this movie really inspired the idea of like the fast paced zombie. Because prior to this, it was what Romero was doing with his, Of the Dead series, and, super slow paced, and but this adds that extra bit of horror to it and, excitement to everything. So
all the zombies any vast zombie movie that I see scares the shit out of me because I know immediately I would die if that was me.
Yeah, I'd be dead.
Yeah. I can't run.
No,
so.
Me neither. And trying to
but I still love this movie.
Right, yeah. It's so good. But
it is really good.
For the next episode, we will be following up with the sequel to this film, which I have actually not seen, which is 28 Weeks Later.
Okay.
So,
well, you're in for a ride.
I'm excited. I actually didn't know that this movie that 28 Weeks Later was a thing up until like a couple months ago.
It did not do well.
I figured.
Like 28 Days Later did. And it came out much later.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a couple years. I think it's like 8 or 9. I'll have to check when we do the research for that. But
yeah.
I felt like it was a long time.
I know it was a lot more recent, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to do the sequel, and that'll clear us out for October.
Yep.
So.
All right. Yep. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you cult followers for tuning into this episode of the Cult Cinema Podcast. Again, if you haven't already, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. We want to know what people are thinking of the show.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you have a recommendation for what we should, watch and review, post it in the comments. Let us know. Or we have an Instagram too.
Yep. Just DM us on the Instagram. That's easiest. And then we can look at what we got left for the rest of the year and hopefully get it added into the list.
For sure. All right. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. We'll see you on the next one.